I believe the Glazers' reign is slowly coming to an end at Manchester United. But in today's video, we're going to be highlighting why the Glazers are the biggest problem at this club, why we should not be turning at Ten Hag, but more importantly, talking about ways that we can get the Glazers out. We're going to look at past protests that have really impacted the Glazers' stance, things they've done in reaction to this protest, protests that have cost the Glazers money, where they've had to react, and think about what we can do going forward to make sure those Glazers get out of this club. Things we can do to make it even harder for the Glazers to stay. Because right now the Glazers have two good offers and they want more money out of pure greed. They want more money for this club that they've treated badly for 17 years. But they're in a position really where they have to sell the club because they can't really afford to stay on at the club. They don't have the money needed to invest in Old Trafford to get this club back on track. They're not going to be making the kind of money out of the club like they used to. Interest rates are so high, the debt is so problematic. The Glazers are in a position where they know they need to kind of go. There's obviously offers there from new owners. There's the bad results, the negativity, the whole Anthony Greenwood situation and other things going on at the club, which has basically made the value of Man United go down even more. The bidders think, why are we going to bid $6 billion when the club's results are so bad? We're going to have to spend all this money. The Glazers are kind of slowly but surely losing power, slowly but surely realizing it's time to go. And what the Glazers will be doing now is Operation Turn the Fans on Ten Hag, get the fan base divided on Ten Hag in, Ten Hag out, turn the fans on Ten Hag, when actually all the fans need to be united against the Glazers, because as soon as the Glazers and the board come under pressure, which is what they're doing now, the operation is to turn that onto the manager. So we're going to talk about the problems at United and we're going to talk about how we're going to get the Glazers out, things that I think we could do to really sort of push the Glazers out movement and protest along. So I wanted to start this video more so speaking about sort of the problems at United and then going into how we can address these problems. But it was said by Phil that Ten Hag is in a place where a lot of Man United managers have found themselves in, and how it ends depends on the club. If the club sack another manager to appease the players, then no manager can succeed here. If they get rid of the players and back the manager, that may mean 2 steps back and 4 steps forward in the short term. But it's the only chance United have of ever ending this repetitive death spiral. And I think he's spot on with this. Because there's players at this club in this team that Ten Hag doesn't want, and as Ten Hag said, they're not good enough, they're not on my long-term plans, they're not going to be guaranteed game time. And let's be honest, the players that are leaking stuff, the players that are turning on Ten Hag, the players that are creating this toxic environment in the dressing room, are players that Ten Hag said to the board, can you sell them? I don't want them. And some of these players couldn't be sold because we're incompetent at selling. Some of these players could have been sold, but they opted to stay at United for the money. But these players, all in all, are causing problems at Manchester United. And one of the reasons is because the Glazers didn't remove the players that Ten Hag didn't want, Ten Hag doesn't play these players because he doesn't think they're good enough. They're not players that Ten Hag's brought in. And these players that Ten Hag didn't buy in, Ten Hag doesn't want, Ten Hag's made clear he wants to get rid of, they won't sell because they're saying, one, we won't buy a replacement if we sell the player. So Ten Hag's like, maybe I'm going to have to keep him as a bench player. Or B, they can't sell or they refuse to sell because this player spent a lot of money and they don't want to lose money on them. So you have these negative people in the dressing room that in fact the squad morale. But the Glazers won't just kick them all out because they're like, oh, we spent 72 million on Sancho, we spent 80 million on Maguire, this person's on 400 grand a week. But it's like sometimes, maybe short term it's going to impact us with the injuries. But I think, you've got to send a message by kicking out every player, and we wouldn't be in this whole situation if we had Qatari owners. Anyone that Ten Hag didn't want would be gone or frozen out of the squad, and they would have brought in who Ten Hag wanted. And Phil mentioned another thing here. How this ends will be determined by United's ethos and priorities, whether they're doing open heart surgery or cosmetic. United's failures are down to running the club guided by the following principle. When sporting and financial interests do not align, prioritise financial. For United to change that, it will require a massive ideological shift from the Glazers that I don't think they'll be ever humanly capable of. They won't be. They just aren't wired for anything other than prioritising their self-enrichment. And that is true. That the principle at United is, okay, how is this going to help us financially? How will this help us financially? How will that help us financially? Everything that goes on at United is the Glazers talking about, like, oh, what's going to help us improve financially? And you've got Ten Hag, a manager who's trying to enforce standards and disciplines on the players. And the players at United, some of them don't like these standards and discipline being forced on them by Ten Hag. So as soon as we're losing games, these players in the dressing room are instantly turning on Ten Hag, thinking, you know what, let's get him out. And if the Glazers get rid of another manager, it causes another problem with player power, because the players know that as soon as things go wrong, as soon as they don't like a manager, they can get the manager out. These players that are overpaid and aren't that good enough and not wanted by the manager at United know that they can get the manager out. And if the more and more fans start going Ten Hag out, the less and less fans focus on the Glazers out movement. So I think Phil sort of highlights some of the problems at United, and it's very obvious the biggest problem is the ownership, and I wanted to talk about that. It's, I want us as a fan base to get the Glazers out. We need to stay united against the ownership. Even though certain players haven't been good enough, like Maguire, we're not going to blame Maguire. We're not going to blame Ten Hag. We're not going to blame anyone but the ownership. And I think the first thing we can do to get the Glazers out is stay united against the ownership. The second thing is that we are in a good position where there's actually bidders for United. In the past, sometimes we've protested to get the Glazers out, and we're like, oh, but will anyone even buy the club? We now know there's two people looking to buy the club, one better than the other in Qatar. So now it's like, well, the Glazers have a reason to leave. In the past, they never had an option to leave. They now have the option there. So I think when you apply pressure with the takeover and stuff now, and we protest even more, the Glazers might have to go, crap, we're going to have to accept this Qatari bid. That's what we're going to have to do. And you know what? The protests have been working. I hate it when people are critical of Manchester United fans protesting. I absolutely hate it when people go, oh, look at them protesting, oh, because the protests have an impact. The sit-in protest resulted in the TIA fan section kind of being, not allowed for the Galatasaray and Crystal Palace fixtures, because the sit-in protest cost the club money. All that, that sitting in with a couple thousand fans after the Forest game cost the club thousands. Do you know why it cost the club thousands? Because they had to pay people for overtime, they had to pay extra staff, they had to pay security. It cost their pockets. And they wanted to punish the fans that organised this. The True Red Army helped organise the sit-in protest, and then they got punished. They will say, oh no, it's the police that punished them. No, it didn't. The Glazers punished them. Remember when we were doing those Glazer out protests at the beginning of last season, when we were linked to Sir Jim ahead of the Liverpool game? We did loads of Glazer out protests, and all of a sudden we were hearing that the Glazers were banning Glazer out protests. They confiscated a Glazer out banner from a disabled fan. Like, Glazer out scarves were being confiscated. Glazer out banners were being confiscated by staff at Manchester United. They were confiscating stuff. When we were protesting, they went to the broadcasters like Sky and stuff, telling them to not give attention towards the protest, not film the protest. That for me is a sense that actually the Glazers are working. Yes, they're sitting back in their Florida mansion, but I think that's all an impact of how, the protests are working. And one thing we have at United is a very strong and big online community. And one thing I wanted to share and highlight, which actually kind of motivated me to make this video, is the United made a Claim Back United website where they want United fans, I've registered, you guys to register, and basically unite together against the Glazers and stuff. They basically said here, I'm going to read it out together. Today we launched Claim Back United website. Register to stand side by side with fellow fans. They said, please join us and we will guarantee the following. No agenda. We do not answer to anybody. We have nothing to lose. We just want Glazers out. The purpose of this is Glazers out. And this is the first step that they're doing towards, representing a number of United fans to try and get the Glazers out. But they give a bit more detail on this whole situation as well. They said they will be campaigning local politicians, the Premier League and Westminster, continuing to protect our club against this ownership. What does joining give you? They said more targeted protests and campaigns, free registration forever, and everyone is treated equally. They said, if you register, you can formally submit protest ideas, formally submit offers of help, strategies will be published for feedback, and more. So I think it's a good thing to do, because we can see that United is censoring fans. We can see with the TRA not being able to get tickets for certain games, they're trying to censor fans who were trying to get the Glazers out. In the 1958, basically created a sort of Claim Back United page where we can stand together and basically suggest protest ideas and more, which I think is really smart. Which brings me to my reasons why I think we can get the Glazers out. Not only have we got the takeover ongoing, so the Glazers have got an option to leave, not only are the Glazers kind of in a financial position where they can't really stay at United unless we get back on track and winning and start playing well, which doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. But it's obvious the Glazers are the problem. You can change the manager, you can even change some of the players, but we will still continually have the same problems, if nothing above the manager changes. And that is absolute fact. So for me, I think the best way to get the Glazers out now is probably to go with a bit more of a just stop oil approach. That's just my opinion. I think, right now, anything that's going to cause a mass disruption, which is going to maybe use a lot of police resources from the UK government, which will get the UK government to put pressure on the owners. Anything that's really going to impact the Glazers, I think, is probably the best way to get them out. In terms of, we've seen how Just Stop Oil have done it, they cause a big disruption. If we get a game called off, that is massive. We get points deductions. Do I care if we get a points deduction if it means the owners leave? Not at all. If you know, when we got that Liverpool game called off, it was massive. That Liverpool game being called off was absolutely massive. No one's done that in football. And I think for me, if there's a way we could maybe push this takeover over the line, maybe put more and more pressure on the Glazers to sell, it would probably be something like get a big game called off. You know, find a way to stop maybe the opposition's team bus getting in. You know, I think that is probably the way. If you get a game called off, the amount of money that they lose, the points deduction and pressure from the boards, I think there's a way that we can get them out. I think the Glazers are in a position where they know they can't stay much longer. They've got ownership now. They are censoring fans. They're the biggest problem at this club. And I do think there's many ways that we can just get them out by protesting, putting pressure on them, continuing to protest. And I hate it when people are critical of the protests. They say they don't work, they don't work. The protests do work. And even if you can't protest, even if you're not from Manchester or England, saying things online, it helps. It helps massively. Now, let me know your thoughts down below. Smash a like, smash a subscribe. See you next time. Bye.